Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon coming up here on early Thursday morning, May 7th at 3:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So our full moon is in the sidereal sign of Libra, directly across from where our new moon was 2 weeks ago in Aries. We started off that cycle really kind of with a bang, right? Aries is where we have that new energy. We have something we're working towards in a self-propelled way. We just kind of, have an oomph from within, and we go for it. And we kind of don't really look on either side of us to how what we're doing affects anyone else, and we move. The sun is very powerful in Aries. It's exalted there, so it's a place where we feel aligned and we feel our action in tune with that alignment. In the full moon cycle, we're like reflecting upon that. Just as the moon and the sun are joined in the new moon, they're directly across from each other in the full moon. So the moon is reflecting the light of the sun, and it's showing us an opposite energy. It's showing us like, oh, this is what you've been missing. Like, this is what hasn't been in your awareness while you've been doing that thing. You've maybe been not compromising as much, or maybe not as adept in your social interaction. Maybe you haven't been as concerned about, making sure that whatever you're doing is beautiful and, artistic and reaches out to other people. Maybe it's just been kind of a, go for it energy. So the full moon in Libra is really an opportunity for us to reflect on that. If you've been living with people, quarantined with people, perhaps it's a chance to take a step back and think about how you can create more harmonious situation. If you're going back to work or you've been back at work, it's a chance to literally socialize again with other people. And certainly from the written perspective, so much of the communication we now experience, especially during this quarantine, is online, right? So we're engaging with people online, and in Aries, and it's not just been the sun there, it's been Mercury there as well. We've had this sort of sharp, fiery way of communicating where it's like reactionary. As soon as you think something, you say it. That's what happens when Mercury's in Aries. We have a tendency to just think, speak, but not think like about it, not really think about it for a long time, but it just comes into your mind and then you speak or write or type. And this is problematic. It's also a reaction when you read something, when you take in information, you're sort of quick to respond to it, maybe not even read the whole article and just see the first line and react to it. And especially because Mercury has been combust, so it's been really close to the sun. At the time of this full moon, it's actually 3 degrees away. So we see that we feel maybe unheard. When Mercury is combust, we feel like people aren't listening to us, and we might keep saying it again and again in a different way, but maybe trying to be funny or trying to be, trying to make light of it when really we feel very touchy about it. That's one way it can come off. But because it's combust in Aries, we're less likely to be super humorous and more likely to either feel cut off, just cut off communication, feel hurt, close down the door, or we might be sharp with our tongue if that's more of our nature. So both of those planets are across from our moon, full in Libra, and we have a real chance here to work on that and to realize that no matter what somebody's differences are from us, we never are really working towards our own goals if we're knocking everyone else down in the process, because there's really no way to achieve what you want without everybody. Everyone is required, right? Everyone needs to jump on board. Not everyone in the whole world for each specific project you're working on, but especially in these times where we have these huge global issues, and at least within our countries, or at least within our states, we have some level of working together that needs to happen. The more adversity, the more we are divided as individuals, the harder our goals become to meet, no matter what you want, no matter what you believe, no matter where you are on the spectrum. So that's a really important skill. And of course, it's a very important skill every day of our life in the regular world, when we're not in these crazy intense times, just, you know, everybody needs some level of people skills. You need to be able on some level to engage with other people in a way where you take into account that they also have opinions, needs, wants, and those need to be met also. So this particular star that we're in with this full moon is called Vishakha. And Vishakha, incidentally, is not, it's not quite as compromising as the other placements in Libra, because it has a quality of like distinct choice that, you know, if a person has Vishakha as their moon or their rising sign or their sun, they have a distinction about them, and their choice that they're making is a distinct path. And this can often actually lead to people being loners who have this as their natal moon star, their natal rising star. The sun is actually debilitated here, so it's the opposite of where it was in the new moon if the sun was here, but the moon is one here at the moment, and the moon becomes debilitated as she crosses the threshold from Vishakha in Libra into Vishakha in Scorpio. So literally right after our full moon, especially because it's so early in the day, at least in Pacific time, as it gets later in the day, our energy is going to start to get more and more tumultuous in this placement. It's something to be aware of, that we're working on harmony, but that's not necessarily conducive to our feeling nature. We don't necessarily feel the unconditional love and emotional security that the moon, that part of us, our psyche, our mind, our emotions really wants to feel. We feel a little bit more like, reliant on other people, and it's more about what other people are reflecting back to us. When the moon is in Aries, we don't really care. We're just going for it, which is also not connective, right? That's also not nurturing and doesn't feel good and isn't connective. But when the moon is in Libra, we're wanting everything to be equal and fair, and that's not always going to be, that's just not always the case. There's, to a mother to a child, it's not going to be fair. To one worker to the next worker, it's not going to be fair. And certainly in our current dilemma we're in, nothing's fair. We're not all in this together. I've heard quotes around this. I can't think of the exact verbiage, but it's like we're not all in the same boat. We're in the same storm. That's what it was. We're in the same storm, but we're not on the same boat, right? Some people have had to work through this whole thing and maybe even been paid less than people who got laid off and got unemployment. Some people have been seriously sick and maybe even, died or almost died or lost loved ones or something like that. Some people have had a really nice vacation with their families and have all their needs more than met. So we're not all in this together in the exact same way. And the fairness will never really be there. And that's something that Libra is constantly reckoning with. We're constantly reckoning with the fact that balance isn't, and fairness isn't. And compromise doesn't mean that everyone gets an equal share of things. Doesn't mean that everyone, that it's tit for tat exactly. It means that we come from a place of compromise, but the playing field to begin with was not even. Nothing was even to begin with, and it won't be even afterwards either. And that's something that's very challenging for the Libra mind to get around, and it's always trying to bring it back. It's always trying to bring back to that place of balance, for better or for worse. This star, Vishakha, is where we become more sort of warrior-like in what we're doing. We are seeing the fork, we're seeing the shaka, the fork, the branch, and we have the V is the distinct, it's the distinction of the path, and we choose maybe one of the paths that we see before us, but we also have an opportunity to come up with like a third path or fourth path or whatever, a path that isn't being laid before us. We don't just have the choices that are fed to us. We have choices mean, there's no end to the choices that we actually have in any given moment. We just don't see it because we come from this place of limitation, and we, especially in this past few months, have had a lot of fear-based ideology, and even action has been fear-based with all these planets in Capricorn. We've really been coming from that place of, the have to, what we have to do. This is what we have to do. Whether this is what we have to do collectively to stop the spread of COVID, or this is what we have to do as a government in order to, have people be able to stay home, or this is what we have to do. There's a lot of that energy with Capricorn. And we've had Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter all there. And Saturn, incidentally, is giving drishti to this full moon, although the degrees are pretty far, so it's not a tight gaze. But he is giving his one-way gaze, reminding us of our responsibilities, reminding us of the fact that there is still this looming fear over us, and also of the boundaries that we need to set up. We need to set up boundaries around our communications with others and our compromises with others. We may or may not agree to things that we feel in our heart are right. And we often feel like we have to do something, so we make those compromises. And I think that's especially true for regular people, people who don't necessarily have all the choices in the world due to their financial situation, due to their responsibilities, their familial responsibilities, maybe their health problems, or whatever the different story is. That there's a lot of people who feel trapped. And I think this virus really brought that up for all of us, really brought up the dysfunction in our society and the many choices and paths that could be that we haven't allowed to be, because we've been so stuck in this paradigm of these are our choices, and that's what we've been fed from the top down. This is what you choose, or this is what you choose. Those are your only two choices, and fight each other about it. But neither of those choices really work, and we're not that's not what we want. So we have other choices. We just have to create them, imagine them, hold space for them, and really set up boundaries around naysayers of that. There's always going to be the naysayers who come in, who are really like almost the minions for the ruling class. Whatever the thing is that's being pushed down on people, there'll always be people who've been convinced to do the work for everyone else and sort of naysay. So it's up to those who have the imagination and the space within them, the heart space within them, the vision for the future, which is a big thing that's happening right now, to really set up boundaries around what they're willing to hear in terms of that, and allow ourselves to only come from a place of acceptance and love, and really try to not have fear be the main driving force in what we do. Move away from a little bit of the have to. And this is going to be really supported by a lot of different factors in this particular cycle. So we have Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus all moving into retrograde motion in the next week. By the 14th, all three of those planets will be retrograde. Retrograde is not where the planets start moving backwards, although that's kind of the reality most people think of. What it is that we're here on Earth and we're looking at the planets, and our motion on Earth is now faster than those planets. So it appears as though they're moving backwards. And the energy is then stuck, right? At first it's stuck because it slows down, stations, and then it begins its retrograde cycle where it looks as though it is moving backwards. And when planets go retrograde, we start to really internalize the energy. So we move away from the external function of those energies, and we start to bring it in and reflect and ruminate and consider and have this quality of questioning where we are, instead of acting with that energy out in the world and letting that energy affect what we're doing, it becomes just more of a internal process, and we're not as able to manifest with that energy. So Saturn and Venus have been in their own signs. Venus has been in Taurus, Saturn has been in Capricorn. These two planets are in intelligence. They are highly intelligent because they're in their own sign. So we've had proper fear, perhaps, proper boundaries with our social distancing, proper capacity for solitude, proper capacity to sort of let go and surrender to what is and accept things like death and time, the amount of time we've been out, loss, financial loss, loss of life, perhaps lack of health. We've been able to accept a lot of these things because Saturn has been in its own sign. As it moves retrograde, we start to question what we've been committed to. We start to question our boundaries. We start to question our fear. We start to question what we've humbled ourselves in service to. And that becomes problematic because the energy was actually operating pretty well. And now we're confused. And the energy that's in high intelligence, it's not that it's not intelligent anymore, it's just that we need that energy to manifest out because it's functioning well. Likewise with Venus, we've had Venus in our own sign of Taurus, where our happiness, our sense of happiness comes from really taking care of our needs. Taurus is the natural second house. It's the house where we care about, our needs being met through money, through comfort, through food, through, feeling basic human connection, sensuality, pleasure, art, beauty, and really things like gardening, cooking, and eating are our major Taurian themes, which is obviously the most essential form of taking care of our needs as well as finding pleasure. One of the most basic things we can do is break bread, with others. One of the most basic things we can do to take care of our needs is to garden and grow our own food. And of course, we all need to eat. So it can be gruel and liver and really disgusting food, or it can be this, wonderful, delicious meal. We can eat it by ourselves, sitting in our castle, eating our fancy food, or we could share it with others. So Venus in Taurus has a quality where we have our needs met, and we have them met in a lovely way, in a way that feels good. And we maybe even luxuriate a little. This probably has added to some niceness in our quarantine situation. You're stuck with people, at least you're making good food, at least you're gardening, at least you're all trying to get along and trying to be happy. When Venus begins the retrograde motion, we start to question our relationships. We start to question what makes us happy. We start to question all of these things that have been bringing us pleasure. And we fall into a situation where we're, just not sure. That internalization of the energy makes it really important to us. It makes it something that's like acutely heightened for us, but it also makes it not manifest in the outside world. So we might be suddenly, care a lot about relationships and care a lot about happiness, but we're not doing the things necessary to make that happen anymore. And, so that's problematic for us. Now, Venus is only going to be retrograde for a short while. Venus and Mercury are between the Earth and the Sun. So when they're retrograde, they're actually kind of closer to the Earth. The energy is magnified for us, but it's a shorter period of time. So even though Mercury retrograde is kind of like gets the highest billing of all the retrograde planets, the two that are actually the most problematic are Jupiter and Saturn, because they stay retrograde for a very long time, and they really affect us in big ways that we don't necessarily realize, and they affect us on a societal level much bigger. Venus and Mercury are very much engaged in the one-to-one interaction of our social life, and so of course that feels sucky when it's not working, and especially with Mercury, we do so much on phones and computers and things now that it really stunts our capacity to get work done or to even just get basic communication done. But when Jupiter and Saturn are retrograde, it's affecting big social level things like our beliefs and ideals, our government, our commitment, our fear, all of these sort of massive things that affect us, and it's such a long period of time. And it's really like almost half the time that of all the time. It's like half the time, half the year, half their cycle in a sign, half their transit in a sign. So it can make a really big difference for all of us, not only personally, but on a bigger scale. So we're going to see with Jupiter that it's actually been in debilitation. So Jupiter's been in his most constrictive placement. Jupiter being the sign of our ideals, our beliefs, what inspires us, also government and, governance. And that internalization, that retrograde motion actually can be helpful. Because that planet wasn't manifesting as well in the outside world to begin with, the retrograde motion allows us to think a little bit and be like, what were our beliefs around all this? Do we have correct beliefs right now, or are they feeling a little fear-based? Jupiter is where we want to expand and where we want to see all the potentials and all the possibilities, where we want to raise to the higher potential. And in Capricorn, it's like end game, death. Must get there and must have these, these markers met along the way. Must have food, must have water, must have shelter. It's this sort of really dialed in earth sign that wants us to survive, that's really focused on survival. And Jupiter is where we want to move beyond the plane of earthly survival. We want to move out of the reptilian brain. We want to move to the human brain, where we can really see our full potential and meet it. So we have had a lot of struggle. Now, Jupiter has been joined, both the exalted Mars and Saturn in his own sign, giving kind of a leg up there, but it's been a leg up. It hasn't been a shift of the ideals themselves or a shift of the belief systems themselves. It's just been that while all that physical work is happening, Mars is toiling away, just laying bricks, and Saturn is setting the right boundaries and all this kind of stuff. That's just led to better operating ideals and better operating belief systems and things like that. But it hasn't actually altered the state or where they're coming from, which is fear, which has been the basis. It's been fear. So now we have Mars in Aquarius as of yesterday, and this is a, no longer exalted, no longer in the physical channeled sign, where he has somewhere to put that energy, somewhere to put that fire, because that fire can get really explosive if it doesn't have a channel. Capricorn digs a ditch that goes all the way somewhere to the end game, and Mars can just go. Just go. One foot after the other, disciplined, daily action. That's what Mars loves. Aquarius, we bring it in, and it's like a social justice sign. It's a sign where we see the ways that the power structures haven't been working for us. It's opposite Leo. We see how those who hold power have been keeping down those who don't have power. How the systems and the structures that we implement and the paradigms that we subscribe to don't work, and how people are left out in the dust. That there's a humility there. When somebody has Aquarius in their own chart, you see a lot of humility, which is sort of their Achilles heel. It's the problem that keeps them from putting their brilliant ideas out into the world. But Mars is not intrinsically humble. Mars is where we have the fire, the action, and when it doesn't have a physical place to do it, all the bricks have been laid, or I got laid off from my bricklaying job, and now all I have to do is to see how wrong the system is and see all the ways it needs to be fixed. But unlike Mercury, which might think about the different ways to fix it and imagine that and create a blueprint for what that could look like, Mars is action, and it gets fiery. So we've already started to see some level of social unrest here. That's already started to come, and I've been talking about this for weeks, the fact that Mars coming into Aquarius would bring this. But the level of it is going to change, because instead of it sort of being a group of people who are already upset, it's going to kind of be everybody. There's a place, and of course we each have our own placements in our charts. It's different houses for each of us, so it might affect your life differently. If it's your fourth house, it might affect your home life more and stuff like that. Maybe you realize the ways in which there's been an uneven power structure in your home or something like that. But on a, on a global scale, everyone will be recognizing the ways things haven't been working. And maybe we've all already been recognizing it, but now the anger is focused there. Before, maybe we saw it and it was like, wow, this is really kind of weird that this whole pandemic can happen and there can be such inequality, that we really can all be on different boats and in the same storm, and the boats can be this unfair, that some people are just going to completely fall flat and others are getting richer and richer and richer and richer and richer by the moment. That's not right. And we are collectively going to realize it more, because people who've sort of been okay before, who were like, well, it's good enough for me, I'm doing okay, hasn't been too bad, are now starting to feel some of the suffering too, right? Like small business owners and even medium-sized business owners, people who had pretty good jobs that maybe can't work their jobs right now, or can't work their jobs as much, or have to work from home and suddenly homeschool their children while they're working their jobs. They find out that's not so easy. So a lot of the struggles that people who have less money, or are single parents, or have already been dealing with, those are coming to light. And then people are also starting to reflect on like the essential workers and people who are working in grocery stores, and it's like they're making maybe less money than the people who are unemployed right now, and that's also not fair. So the more and more we start to see it, it's like, wow, this is kind of a messed up system. Like, how is it that we pay people so little? How is it that the cost of living is so high? And how is it that there's these few people that seem to have such an insane amount of wealth, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, and no matter what happens, it works out for them? So this uprising, beyond just being that simple, this group of people feel this way and this is the mainstream storyline and this is the other people's storyline, is going to kind of take on more dimension and be more present for all of us, and no matter where you fall on the spectrum. And so also on the 14th, on the day when we see the final planet going retrograde to create, when we see, all three of those planets now retrograde, the moon will be joined Mars, and it'll be very close. So we'll see our emotional state, our mind be connected to that anger and frustration, and having no physical channel to put it in, it's just going to go out. So I do expect to see more unrest, and each of us to feel some level of it in some way, not just in this really simple, this side and this side kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I think is really important with this particular full moon being in Vishakha, is that the choice is within each of us. We can be fed whatever paradigm we're fed. We always will be. It's not a new thing. We like to think of our own time in history as being something that's so unique. But if you do just a little bit of due diligence, you can go back in time and see that these kind of things have happened again and again and again. Right now, there might be more widespread knowledge because of the internet, but there's also more widespread capacity for misknowledge and misinformation as a result of it. So there'll always be a feed line of what is possible, and then there'll always be each of us as individuals, and we each have responsibility. We elect officials. If we don't like them, we can unelect them. We can elect different people. If we don't like the whole system and the whole way it's working, we have a lot at our disposal. We have a lot of choices at our disposal to rectify things. We just don't realize it. We feel like we're powerless, but actually we're quite powerful. Each one of us as individuals is powerful because we can make different choices within ourselves. We can always free ourselves from the inside out. That's really the only way to actually free ourselves. You can put somebody in jail, you can take them out of jail, you can give them $1 million, you can take away all their money. Any which dynamic you put somebody in, they can be living in chains within themselves. And any which dynamic you put someone in, they can be living from a place of freedom within themselves. So, we each have that potential within us to take a distinct path that is freeing and that is of love and that is of the future we want to envision. So it's not that this is the only choice and this is the only choice and that Aquarius part of us can only fight for the, can only jump in a picket line that already exists. We can create our own picket line. And I know just from all the different wonderful people that I'm blessed to know that there's a lot of people who want a different picket line. There's a lot of people who aren't choosing the simple choices that are out there, and that are, doing the work and really trying to raise the vibration on the planet and raise their own personal vibration and reckon with their shit. We each have a whole world of hurt within us that we need to heal. And until we do that personal work, it'll always be there. It'll always be outside of us, and we'll always see it because it's ours too. So we need to do that work personally, but also really imagine what we want to see instead of accepting what is. It's like kids are given these handouts with pictures and they can color them in. Or you can give a kid a blank piece of paper and let them draw whatever they want, and they can tell you what it is. And we could be that. We could be drawing our own future and really working to create it. And that's what I more than anything feel like we have potential for here. The deity of Vishakha is Indra Agni, and this is the Agni is the fire, right? And we see that the fire is the place where we transform our reality, our physical reality, to spirit. It's in many, many traditions a place where you offer prayers to, you offer something to the fire, and it burns. It's a physical thing that burns, and then the smoke goes up and is moving up to the, to the higher realms, and it's an offering. It's also where we burn what no longer works for us, and it transforms. Nothing is really more transformative than fire because it literally completely changes the quality of whatever's put in it. And the Indra side of it, Indra is the king of the gods, and he is where we sometimes have a conflated ego and where we feel very proud, but where we're also quite courageous and able to step in and do what needs to be done to take down the beast, to take down the demons, within ourselves, right? And as I said, this star starts to move into debilitation for the moon. As we get into Scorpio, we're in that state of debilitation. The demons we're facing in Scorpio are our own. They are our own fears, our own darkest nights, our own, spiders in the shadows, and we have to face them. And so that courage that is required of us, and sometimes it does require a really high ego and a sort of almost, ridiculousness to even step into battle, right? There's a part of you that has to be kind of a little bit not practical. If you're just living in a really humble, practical state, you might never step into battle. So there's a quality where you have to be foolhardy enough to do it. And you go in and you find out that no matter how big the beast is, no matter how enormous whatever it is we're facing is, it can be brought to size when you just take one simple step. You just have to know where to hit it, or where to stab it, or where its own Achilles heel is, where the soft spot is, where it's going to break. And that's true of all of our problems. Every problem we have, any given problem we might have in this moment, if we take a moment and really establish like one little place we can get in, one little place we can check something off our list, or kind of solve the problem a little bit, that's our inroad. And then it starts to change. The landscape itself changes. We're no longer dealing with the same thing we were dealing with even 5 minutes before. It's a new world. So that's what I'd like to offer us now, is that we have potential for a new world. And it doesn't have to be the one that the power structures that be want. It doesn't have to be the one that the fearful, unimaginative people want. It doesn't have to be any of that. It can be the one that we create. And that's up to us. Each person who realizes that, it's up to us. So as we move into this retrograde period, and we are thinking and we are questioning and we are wondering, and maybe even causing some upset in relationships that were flowing pretty smoothly and everything was going okay, and now suddenly we're having a lot of trouble in that area, it's an opportunity to see when we see what's wrong, it's an opportunity for change. It's not just a chance to be like, ugh, everything sucks. You know, it's not manifesting in the outside world. My happiness isn't manifesting. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? As the sun and Mercury move into Taurus next week, it's going to be a little bit more challenging because the sun is less aligned with the power and more aligned, more coming from a place of wanting to feel comfort, wanting to feel ease, wanting to feel that, wanting to move back into that place where everything feels nice and warm and fuzzy. And Mercury as well is in good dignity in in Taurus, because it's grounded speech and it's focused on, compromise and saying things in a way that will be met a little better. Coming out of Aries where it's just like bang, 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 bang. This is a way of like, well, hey, maybe if I say this, it won't be met with such, such vehement hatred as we see now. And maybe I can even say it a few different ways. And the goal becomes to actually connect and be heard and have the other person be heard, which is much more positive communication. But it's still not the same thing as clear discernment, which is where Mercury really does the best. It's not the same thing as having like an agenda-free intake of information and output of information. There's an agenda. The agenda is to get along. And oftentimes when we want to get along, as we're going to learn in this Libra full moon, we compromise, even on things that we shouldn't compromise on, even on really strong boundaries or really strong beliefs or really important core values. We compromise because getting along seems so important, and we can't imagine being abandoned, because other than our fear of death, I would say for many people, the fear of being unaccepted is even higher than the fear of death, a fear of being sort of cast out. Well, in Vishakha, it's the part of Libra where we accept that, where we accept a little bit more that we might not always be liked, and we still have to choose the path that's right. We still have to distinguish our path, and it's a placement, a star that grows with time. So over the long haul, that tree that we plant, those roots go down deep into the earth and it grows up, and over time it will become this shelter, this shade for others to sit underneath. In the beginning, it's just this seed, and you have to believe in it. You have to water it, because it's hard to believe it's going to ever become anything massive, but it can. Just like another symbol for Vishakha is the potter's wheel, where it's like that time, that patience it requires to make a piece of pottery. It takes a lot of patience. And then you have something useful when it's done. So the results that come over time from that patience, age, just patient causes us to be more patient, because we see more things happen. We see the results of our short fuses. We see the ups and downs. We see that everything does kind of take a long time, and we're able to grow some patience there. So we learn a lot in this star. It's a place where we are really able to learn how to step away from the comfort of always being agreeable and always being liked, and move into the next phase, which is kind of that emotional tumult where we face our biggest fears. And our biggest fears really in Scorpio are bigger than death, are that we might lose other people, that we might lose the person we love. Let's say if you're in a partnership, that you might lose that loved one. That's, again, arguably a bigger fear than losing your own self. It probably is not, because when you actually get to the moment of death, as much as you might have think you accept it, you might struggle and fight against it. I don't know, because I'm here to talk to you. So I haven't faced that fear, but I have faced the fear of losing somebody that I loved, and that is very, very, very challenging. And I've also faced the fear of not being accepted in a bigger way, not just from one person, but from a group of people. And that is also very primal in us, to be accepted, because that's how we survive. We survive by having other people around us. We can't survive just on our own. So all of these themes coming up for us here in this the next week, we will see massive shift happening. And I've spoken a lot past few weeks kind of on this subject, and also on the fact that we're in this time snake, this Kalasarpa yoga, where we're all sort of in this trippy zone that feels otherworldly. And you can even feel now that we're starting to come out of that a little bit, but we're still in it. And at the end of May, by about May 23rd, I think in the very most simple degrees, we'll see Mercury break free of that Kalasarpa and start to bring our discrimination into a place of more objectivity and more discernment, and just really being able to decide true from false and things like that. And have objectivity not only in what we take in, but in what we say, and not kind of have this delusional aura around everything. That's really the overlying presence of the time snake, is that everything, all the energies are trapped in between the two nodes. And there's this quality of the otherworldliness. And you might be getting really great downloads from those other realms if you're sitting and meditating every day. And, if your time out has been one where you've really taken a time in, and you've really not just been, gardening and making sourdough starters and hanging out with your friends and family, and you haven't been doing the other end of it of just Netflixing and drinking or whatever else. If you've really been taking the time to sit in a meditative and prayerful space, then maybe you have gotten some very, very solid downloads. But it's also a time when there's a lot of illusion and a lot of delusion and a lot of lies and a lot of deception and confusion, and that when we come out of that, we'll have a lot more clarity as individuals and collectively as a whole. And that's actually the last thing I'll leave you with, is that Vishakha is the nakshatra right before Anuradha, and it's often also reflected by Radha herself, who is the devotion. She is that which is able to completely surrender all the foibles, all the sort of things that make her not perfect in society, and surrender them to God, or to love, energy, Krishna, whatever it is that you call that. That part of us that can take the sacrificial fire of Indra, Agni, and offer our efforts towards that. And this is something I've spoken about endlessly recently, is that we can always focus on the material world, we can always focus on the things that we specifically want to see, but we never really know how it'll all play out. We think this is bad and this is good, and if this happens the world will end, and if this doesn't happen, people are very hardcore in their beliefs right now, and that's been a big part of this nodal axis with the South Node and their beliefs. They think it's all about the information, but really it's about their hardcore long-held beliefs. But regardless of the physical technicalities, if this happens, we don't always know how it's going to play out. In fact, we really never do. If you've ever lived life for even a minute, then you know that you've had things happen to you that seemed awful, like worst case scenario, and turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And likewise, there have been things that you've, really, really wanted more than anything, and got them, and then been like, ugh, why did I ever want that? That's life. We don't know. And that's where faith comes in. That's where something higher than us comes in. We don't know. And all the figuring, thinking, willing, and ego, and whatever we might want to bring into it, it's not going to change that. So when we offer our energy and our efforts towards whatever is going to work out, just that thought, like whatever is actually best for not just us, but for everybody, that's when real grace steps in. That's when everything unfolds, and it all starts to work for us, for everyone, because we're not coming from that egoic place. The ego can only see what's in front of it. It's only it's too hard to have the imagination for what is possible when it's coming from an egoic place. In order to imagine what we really want, we have to have faith, because it's not here yet. We can't see it. So it's not a choice that's in front of us. It's a choice that's beyond us. And we must have faith, not in anything specifically, but just having faith is living in that reality that there is more beyond us, and that we are held, that the earth will continue to be underneath us, and that the sky will continue to be above us, and that we can always bring our feet to earth and raise up towards something higher, and that we have to have trust in that, because just like a bird has to one day decide to jump off and fly, and it's like, it kind of just has to trust that it's going to work. Well, we don't have a visual. We don't, you know, we sometimes have to be the first bird to do it. We can't wait till all of our brother and sister birds do it first. We might have to be the one to step off and fly. And, you know, there'll be a lot of people standing there telling you you're going to fall in the process. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you have a wonderful full moon, and wherever you are in the world and in your home or work or whatever it is you have to do, that you're able to really find your grace and what your truth is, and really start to discern that from the voices outside of you. And if you like this video, it's super helpful if you like it. Just click the little hand there, or comment. If you share with friends, that's awesome. Subscribe to the channel so you can find out when more videos like this come up. And if you want to become a email subscriber on my list, the link is down below. It's at www.radhahomeyoga.com, R-A-D-H-A home, H-O-M-E, yoga, Y-O-G-A.com. And there you can find lots of special offers. So if you sign up for my yoga newsletter, then you get free yoga classes, at least during the duration of this quarantine. If you sign up for the astrology reports, right off the bat, you'll get Saturn in Capricorn for all 12 rising signs. So you'll be able to see what's going on for Capricorn for you. You know, now there's lots of other signs there. I wrote that when Saturn first moved in January, but you'll be able to get a picture of what areas of your life are really affected. So I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you really soon. Namaste.